The memorial for Daunte Wright continues to grow 2 days after he was killed by a police officer. We hear from a human rights advocate on what it's like right now in the Twin Cities.
The U.S. women's soccer team may be one step closer to a major victory. Find out what this means for the players' fight for equality.
But first, Johnson & Johnson vaccine distributions came to a halt this morning. We'll tell you why and what this means for USC students waiting to get vaccinated.
Live from USC, you're watching Annenberg TV News.
The CDC and FDA have called for a pause in Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccinations. Good evening, I'm Noah Camras reporting from Palm Springs.
And I'm Cambri Guest reporting from Los Angeles. The announcement comes after 6 Americans who received the single-dose vaccine experienced severe side effects.
Health officials say they are recommending the pause out of an abundance of caution. The harmful developments are extremely rare. Out of 6.8 million administered doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there have been only 6 reported cases of blood clots. All of the cases affected women ranging in age between 18 and 48. Symptoms developed 6 to 13 days after receiving the vaccine. USC was set to administer the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at Lyon Center to hundreds of qualifying students this Thursday and Friday. We spoke to Chief Health Officer Dr. Sarah Van Orman about the future of COVID-19 vaccinations for SC students.
We were able to get adequate Pfizer doses to cover those people who had already signed up for the vaccine. We don't know yet what our ongoing supply is going to look like. The return to normal for not just USC, but our community is really, I think, unfortunately, very, very dependent on people being vaccinated and very high vaccine rates.
The impact was immediate and worldwide. Every state in the United States and countries in Europe and Africa have paused injections of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine until further notice.
2 days after the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright, the officer responsible for his death and the chief of police both resigned. The Brooklyn Center mayor hopes the resignations will ease the tensions in this Minneapolis suburb.
I'm hoping that this will help bring some calm to the community, although I think ultimately people want justice. They want, full accountability under the law. And so that's what we're going to continue to work for.
Fences are now up around the Brooklyn Center Police headquarters to prevent protesters from breaking in. A practicing lawyer and the deputy director of an advocacy group in Minnesota share their thoughts on the shooting.
On the ground in Minneapolis right now, it's pain. It is confusion and bewilderment that this could continue to happen, and yet recognition that this is something that is not new to Minneapolis. People are wanting to know how we can continue with a policing apparatus that allows this to happen, and it's rooted on the systemic racism in our community.
This country cannot even complete the prosecution of a police officer who murdered a Black man before the next police officer murders another Black man. It's ridiculous. I really believe that police accountability and holding them to answer for the wrong that they do is what's required here.
There are various ways to support Wright's girlfriend and their son. You can send donations to the Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal accounts you see on your screen.
Los Angeles law enforcement officials are preparing for the possibility of protests over the killing of Wright and the upcoming verdict in Officer Derek Chauvin's murder trial. Meantime, the LA Board of Police Commissioners met today to review 3 reports that found the LAPD mishandled its response to last summer's protest against police brutality.
One of the reports found, quote, inadequacies with command and control training for officers, failures by supervisors to properly communicate strategies to officers, and an outdated approach to protests that prohibited police from controlling multiple large demonstrations at once.
The 3 reports contain recommendations for how the LAPD can improve. The commissioners also asked the department to consolidate recommendations and rank them by priority.
A historic first tomorrow, the House Judiciary Committee will hold a legislative session on H.R. 40 that would establish a commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. I'm Emily Bonilla reporting from Altadena. The measure has been proposed for nearly 30 years. If H.R. 40 passes, a commission would be created to examine slavery and discrimination in the United States and colonies from 1619 to the present, and recommended appropriate remedies. We spoke to two experts on race and reparations history on why this bill is so important right now.
The fact that the Judiciary Committee would be ready to move this bill forward at this point is an indication that there is the political support larger within the Congress that this bill could actually pass. There is an important role to play in standing together on these kinds of issues. It's not a community issue. It's a country issue.
Slavery was actually the backbone of the US credit economy, that financial institutions and banks and insurance companies were built out of slavery. And of course, many of our oldest universities were built out of slavery. That's not only in the era of enslavement, but also in the 20th and even 21st century. From wherever you're coming from, right, it's about saying, how are we going to make America better?
The House Judiciary Committee is expected to send H.R. 40 to the floor of the House by tomorrow. The legislation has about 180 co-sponsors.
The holy month of Ramadan began last night, with many looking forward to breaking fast with friends and family. Last year, mosques were closed around the world. A spokesperson for the Islamic Center of Southern California says many had to celebrate in isolation.
It means a lot to the community. I think people are really missing the human interaction. It is a test of faith to be alone and to not interact with others. We're coping with it as best we can, and we're here to support our members of the community that, are unfortunately isolated at this point.
Though Ramadan traditions won't be completely returning to normal this year, many are still excited to celebrate in small groups.
The modifications that my family have been taking is, not going to other family members' houses, whereas before we'd be at, my uncle's house, and they come over our house in bigger gatherings. It's more so just immediate families, breaking their fast separately.
As the pandemic rages on, Muslim authorities have advised those observing Ramadan to bring their own prayer rugs to mosques, wear face masks, and keep prayer time short.
COVID-19 forced many entrepreneurs to pause their passion projects. Reporter Lillian Gonzalez spoke to a Muslim entrepreneur about her clothing company and the many struggles facing female-owned businesses.
Gislan Gwenes and her company, The Modist, have been featured in Forbes, Vogue, Glamour, The New York Times.
It's never been a more extraordinary time to be a woman.
The Dubai-based entrepreneur launched a fashion revolution 4 years ago on International Women's Day.
The business was a growing business. It was resonating in many markets, including America, which was about 35% of our market.
She was selling luxury clothes for women like herself.
I dress modestly, which means that I prefer, as you can see, longer sleeves, long hems, covered neckline, and so do many women around me. And we've always found shopping experience quite frustrating for us.
Then last April, she posted this on Instagram. The global crisis that has hit the world has left our young business vulnerable with no option but to cease operating.
We were at, the last stages of a conversation with an investor who, because of COVID, decided to hold all investments in their pipelines, and we were one of those. So unfortunately, we had to shut doors.
The economy is beginning to recover, but it turns out that businesses run by women are not bouncing back as fast. A recent survey finds businesses owned by women are taking 3 times longer to recover than those owned by men.
Because of school and daycare closures, parents had to figure out what they were going to do about childcare. And in many families, this means moms stepping up even before the pandemic. And that's often meant that women have to stop working or take a step back from from the businesses that they operate as well.
Gwennis worked in private equity for about 14 years before she shifted into entrepreneurship. Now, she's not sure what's next.
It's a little bit too soon to say what I am doing from that perspective, but what I've also started doing in the meanwhile, as I work on my new business, is actually use my social media platform more intentionally and try and share some of the learnings, because we all know, during COVID, a lot of women lost jobs.
A lot of women, nearly 6 million, lost jobs since February 2020, according to the National Women's Law Center.
So, the challenges are immense. And when you are an entrepreneur, period, and I think when you are a female entrepreneur, without trying to, victimize ourselves, the challenges are even, bigger and wider.
Gwennis is still very passionate about modest fashion, as well as the community she has built through social media. She knows the demand is still there and hopes to be back in business soon. For Annenberg Media, I'm Lillian Gonzalez in Los Angeles.
A federal judge approved a deal between the U.S. women's national team and the U.S. Soccer Federation over unequal working conditions. This decision means the players can now move forward with their appeal over equal pay. The settlement gives female athletes charter flights, hotels, venues, and staff equal to that of the men's national team. But the settlement did not address the central issue of the case: equal pay. We spoke to a collegiate soccer player about what this decision means for her future.
I have had aspirations to play professionally since I can remember, and I think it's always been unfortunate in my eyes that a piece that I think about when I decide if I want to play professionally is whether or not I can make ends meet financially. And I think that that's so important to understand when you're thinking about female professional athletes, is that it becomes a question almost of passion for the game versus can you really make a living out of it? And I think there will be more obstacles, but I think these girls have really shown the perseverance and importance that this is, and wanting to better it for the generation that comes after them within the U.S. Women's National Team. So I don't think they're going to give up anytime soon. And I think they will fight until they see it as equal.
The U.S. Soccer Federation said they are, quote, 100% committed to equal pay. We have offered the U.S. Women's National Team identical compensation provided to our men's players for all matches controlled by U.S. Soccer. But the women's team sees this as an empty promise. They responded saying, quote, if the U.S. Soccer Federation was 100% committed to equal pay, then they would have offered the players equal pay and equal working conditions, and the players would not have been forced to file a lawsuit in order to try and achieve equality.
It's hard to believe, but Kobe Bryant's 60-point grand finale was 5 years ago today. I flew out from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada to LA for Kobe's final game. Nothing quite sums up the greatness of Kobe's final game and career than this game-winning shot to put the Lakers up for good. Being outside of Kobe's last game was like being at Disneyland, but all themed around the Laker legend. Fans gathered from around the world dressed in Kobe gear for a night of pure celebration that made the arena rock.
It's not a sporting event, it's a major event. It's like the Oscars or the Super Bowl or something. And that was the feeling it was on Kobe Bryant's final night. Like, we're going to witness history tonight. We're about to witness greatness. But then all of a sudden, he starts hitting some shots. He starts getting the rhythm. He's got that Kobe snarl again. That is up there as far as just greatest sporting event or game that I've ever gotten to experience.
Trojan legend, SoCal native, NBA star, and lifelong Kobe Bryant fan, DeMar DeRozan even penned an article for the LA Times this morning that gushed about how Kobe's 60-point game was like an Avengers movie.
Mamba out.
I'm Nathan Ackerman with Annenberg Media Sports reporting from Los Angeles. USC men's basketball is fresh off an Elite Eight appearance that was aided by multiple transfers, and the Trojans struck gold in the portal once again. USC got a commitment from 6'3" guard Boogie Ellis out of Memphis on Monday, their first transfer of the offseason. The San Diego native took to Twitter to announce his commitment last night. Ellis averaged 10.2 points per game on 40% shooting last season, and he's a former four-star recruit out of Mission Bay High School. He'll help supplement the point guard position for the Trojans after Taj Edey declared for the upcoming NBA draft last week. Ellis, who enters USC as a junior, helps the Trojans clear up the muddy picture for the 2021-22 roster. Forward Chavez Goodwin announced Monday he's returning for next season, but the Trojans are losing plenty of pieces around him with potentially more to come. All right, let me bring in my co-anchor, Skyler Trepel. Skyler, give me your first impressions on the Boogie Ellis transfer and what it means for this team.
I think this is a great move for USC. Boogie Ellis brought the firepower off the bench for Memphis, and now he brings that firepower to the Trojans at the point guard position, which is especially important with Taj Edey leaving in the offseason. The question is whether or not he can earn an opportunity to start.
Yeah, and this is really becoming Andy Enfield's reputation, right? Killing it in the transfer portal. And given all the talent that the Trojans might lose this offseason, it's going to be important for them to do that again so they can return to being a dominant team. This is only a sign that they're moving in that direction. That's all for sports. Let's send it back to news.
One of Hollywood's gems, the Cinerama Dome, is the latest casualty of the pandemic. The 58-year-old theater, which belongs to the ArcLight and Pacific Theater family, will remain closed.
Heartbroken cinephiles around the world are sad to see these theaters go. One movie lover has a petition with more than 4,000 signatures to try and keep the Cinerama Dome's legacy alive.
I was pretty depressed, but then I thought to myself that I can't be the only one that's depressed about it. So I decided to make the petition to see if other people feel the same way. So now I'm feeling a little bit better to know that tons of people are helping out. We're hoping maybe Netflix, Amazon, Quentin Tarantino to respond to it, or just the different film directors of Hollywood to all work together. Stay open to preserve the legacy of the Cinerama Dome, and also ArcLight is one of the best movie theater chains in the entire world because they respect the artist's creative vision, and they have numerous locations around California, not just the Hollywood location.
Steinberg hopes to see more signatures and support from Hollywood to keep the movie chain from closing, and to one day see movies at the Cinerama Dome once again.
Tonight on Tips for Trojans, we hear from Marshall alum Wing Lee. During college, Lee had internships with Disney Studios and also with Kraft Foods. She says it's important to get a variety of work experience.
Your internships are going to be the place where you find out what you like and what you don't like. You're exploring the different, roles and career paths that could be available to you. And so if they are completely different, that's totally fine. I always tell people to cast your net as wide as possible, because honestly, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. But so that's where it comes in, where you're casting your net. You don't want to take yourself out of the running before you're in the race, right?
Lee worked in finance for 7 years after graduation for Kraft Foods and GoPro. Now she works for Disney Parks and is pursuing her master's at UCLA's Anderson School of Business to elevate her career. She said the Trojan Network and finding mentors were important tools in shaping her career.
I find that having those mentors answer your questions about what's it like being a woman in the workplace, right? What is it like navigating the corporate world? What is it like going to school and working full time, But also on the flip side of that, those D&I conversations, right? Hey, I'm an Asian American in the workplace. How do I navigate that world as well? So I think having different mentors to navigate different conversations will just elevate your career.
Wow, internships with Disney and GoPro and Kraft Foods are things that people just dream about, yet they happen to USC students all the time. I know, it's just incredible. Noah, where would you want to intern if you had the choice of anywhere in the world?
Yeah, for me, definitely the dream is to be at ESPN. Since I was a kid, I've always wanted to anchor SportsCenter. And like you said, I know that being at USC and being on this news, it definitely puts me in the right place to hopefully be there one day.
Absolutely. I have no doubt that you'll get there if that's really what you want. And I personally can't wait to hear you calling games for me sometime in the future.
Thank you. That's it for Annenberg TV News. Thank you so much for watching.
And from all of us at Annenberg Media, have a great night.